is a story that is my version of a story that Don Ketting tells, and he's very generous with saying you can pass these stories on. His story title is One Man's Trouble. But I reworked this story and I just call it Trouble. There was once a farmer who was so poor that even though he worked from sunrise to sunset, he couldn't make ends meet. In the spring, he would plant his crops, and one year there would be a flood. The following year, there'd be a drought. His animals grew thin for lack of food. His hens stopped laying eggs. His cow stopped producing milk. The man was beside himself. One day he sat down on a stump in the barnyard, put his head in his hands, and as he sat there, he noticed something moving up around the barn. It stood upright like a man, but it seemed to be covered with hair or fur. So as he crept closer, he noticed it had black, beady eyes and yellow teeth. And he called out, "What are you? Who are you?" And the creature replied, "I am Trouble. I am the reason for all your misfortune. I like hanging around your farm, causing trouble, trouble, trouble." The man was so angry, he grabbed Trouble, he tied him up with a rope. Then he dug a deep hole over by the pasture fence, and he set Trouble right down in that deep hole. And so he couldn't escape. He got big boulders and piled them right on top of the opening. And you know, the next day, the man's fortune changed. His crops started growing. His trees were laden with fruit. His animals gave birth to their young. The hens started laying eggs. The cows produced more milk than they ever had before. Merchants came from the town to buy his milk and eggs, and people from all over the countryside heard that his produce was the freshest, the best to be found. And little by little, the man got wealthier and wealthier and wealthier. Now, the farmer had a neighbor who had always been a very wealthy man. In fact, he looked down on that farmer thinking his misfortune is due to either laziness or lack of ability on how to run a farm. But when he saw the farmer prospering, he wasn't very pleased. He liked being the wealthiest man in the countryside. So he went down to pay a visit with the farmer. And as they talked, the farmer told him all about Trouble and how he had buried him down in that hole. That night, under the cover of darkness, the neighbor crept into the farmer's yard. He carefully removed those boulders and pulled Trouble right out of that hole, cutting the ropes. Trouble said, "Oh, thank you for rescuing me." And the wealthy neighbor said, "Now you are free to roam around this farm once more." But Trouble said, "Oh no, I don't want to stay around this farm. The farmer was mean to me. He put me down in a hole. But you have been so kind. You freed me. I'd like to hang around you." And so it was. Trouble went home with that wealthy man. Now, that doesn't have to be the end of the story. So I'm giving the story to you. You can continue it, or you can end it as you see fit.